email provider, and I gave them all my bank details and everything that I use. And like, no, there's not enough information here for us to give you. I was like, literally, I don't know what else to bloody give you. So I feel your pain. Oh, and Owen's decided, no, I'm just not having any of this.
He's off. Headhunting. We were supposed to talk about headhunting. Is this actually no? I'll copy and paste.
I'm just checking.
Headhunting culture.
Live.
That's what we are supposed to be talking about tonight. Well, we said last week we'd talk about headhunting culture, didn't we?
Yeah. I'm just checking everyone's lives 1 second. Oh,
I'm just sorting on my live. No, I've got the go ahead off this time.
Hey, Kat. How are the boys? Big rugby match on now. Yes, there is. Oh, here's Owen back.
I am. I can hear you. Oh,
you can hear
my face won't appear.
That's fine. That's fine. Right, hang on. Let's check everyone's.
My chat isn't popping up for some reason. Oh no, there we go. There it goes. Now my chat's on. How's Dennis? How are you keeping?
Owen, it's saying you're not live.
We're trying to fix Owen.
I know, and then every time again it asks for some sort of account.
Oh right, so it's your live as well. It's not linked up. Okay.
Jesus, everything's going wrong for poor Owen tonight.
Owen is the new. I was saying he's the Stone of Tara. Tonight. He's going to proclaim the new High King of Ireland.
Live.
I'd like to put my nominations forward. Whoa, what's the pension like?
Terrible. Crap. Head, no. Oh, good.
Okay.
Are we for numbers and stuff?
All right.
So this is 19 on my side.
Yeah, it just won't pair me or anything, sort of.
I wonder if
it says my email is in use.
Oh, well, maybe we shouldn't use that email.
I know, but it's the one of the...
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just trying to see if there's anything I can do on my side, but there's no.
Yeah, that's the plan. Owen tonight's going to be kinging people. I remember I actually did a live show from Tara years back with the Viking reenactment. It was meant to be for the anniversary of the Battle of Bridge, which we were supposed to do in Dublin, but Dublin Council wouldn't give the go-ahead because, Dublin Council.
Okay.
Forget about your anniversaries. We can't make money out of it, no. Although a big, massive Viking reenactment, they would have made a fortune. Dublin Council. Dublin Council wouldn't know what's good for it.
Yeah, I don't think any councils know what's good for them.
They're so stupid, like. Have me just bitch about Dublin Council now for the next 2 hours.
You don't even live in Dublin anymore.
I know, right? Dublin's horrendous to live in. Just constant bang, 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 bang. Well, the outskirts of it is. Centre of Dublin is also loudish, but I think the outskirts of Dublin is louder than Dublin itself.
Okay, well, right, give me. I'll use Winterberg Dublin Council, and I'm going to get up back in 2 seconds.
Yeah, take your time. I'll just offer shite. Shite. How's Freddie? How are you keeping? Any news, Freddie? Bye. Why is Freddie's comment not popping up on the chat thing here is beyond me. I think some of these chats aren't popping up tonight. Everything. How are you keeping? How's everything doing? Well, Owen's gone anyway. Owen's gone. Miha's gone. Everybody's gone. Just left with my company tonight, lads. Owen last week was what was it? Wanted to talk about headhunting. Headhunting culture. The mythology. Quickly looking through all these notes and stuff here. Because I only know about headhunting culture from the old Finn cycle. Do I have the Finn cycle on me? I do actually. Give us a second. What? The cycle of. No, it's the other one, isn't it? It's the one by Kevin. It's actually right next to me. Bum, 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 bum. This is the book to get. The Early Finn Cycle by Kevin Murray. That's the book to get for the old decapitation, if you're into that type of stuff. Where the boys used to go around cutting off people's heads, and then they used to have, what was it? Used to go eating with it.
Owens.
How's Mihal?
I'm good, mate. I'm just.
Are you live on TikTok as well, or did you not put on the live for TikTok tonight?
I did.
Right. When we fly her over and see how your TikTok's doing.
Oh,
Live.
Right. Are we all go? All systems go. Owen, you're muted.
No, there we go. Oh yeah, we got people flying. Got 202 tonight. I like grass. Well, somebody likes grass over in your channel anyway.
You like grass?
Not me anyway. Not me in particular. Somebody over on your channel likes grass. That's what they're doing over on TikTok, eating grass.
Touching grass. Hang on, let me just. There we go.
Doing rugby. I was
good
asleep.
evening,
How did we
TJ.
do in the rugby last night? Did you watch the rugby, Mihal?
I haven't watched the Six Nations at all. I feel actually really dirty for not watching the Six Nations.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now, Owen.
Yeah,
It's
it's decided to hate on me today. It won't let me log in. I can't get it onto my channel. Though it gives my channel name. So I'm going to lose the 5 cents that I would make.
Well, if any donations tonight, we'll split them with Owen.
The main book actually for Clontarf right now is Sean Duffy. Sean Duffy was the last one who did like a proper major book on the Battle of Clontarf for the anniversary that came out for what was it called in 2014, was it? It's either 2014 or 2004. He came out with a belter of a book. No, it's 2014. He came out with a brilliant book, I'm sure. It's called Brian Brew and the Battle of Clontarf by Sean Duffy. That's kind of the major book right now, actually. I have that book. I should sit down and read it again. I haven't read it since it came out back in 2014, which was handy because we had tons and tons of events that came out for 2014 where actually for a change, Dublin Council did give us the money, but they have to give us the money for the biggest event of the year. Well, not just the year, biggest anniversary in Irish history. I don't know what it is. The Dublin Council is very, very, very insanely reluctant, not just reluctant to give money for our medieval history, but they seem to be a sadist as well for trying to destroy Irish history as well. If you look at the Wood Quay, what happened at Wood Quay and stuff, where they were pouring tarmac over Viking finds and stuff like so.
And now in Wood Quay, they want to kind of knock down the buildings and rebuild them. Not only did it destroy bloody Wood Quay, one of the biggest Viking sites in Europe, and build those monstrosities on top of it. Now they say someone is saying in the council or the corporation, to be more exact, to rebuild it or to move elsewhere.
If they move elsewhere, I swear to God,
we
told you so. We told you so.
Bastards.
I just want to say, with someone was saying about that, I know you own, Philip, you touched on the Battle of Clontarf. Viking Age Ireland by Sean Duffy covers it a bit. Claire Downham has a paper, The Battle of Clontarf in Irish History and Legend. Mary Nimuni has a paper, The Neglected Account of the Battle of Clontarf, which and Dr. Catherine Swift has a paper as well. It's the Dalcash version of the Battle of Clontarf. So I believe they're all free papers that can be acquired through academia or other academic sites, but I believe they're all free. I do have, if you check out my Battle of Clontarf video, I have the sources I used in that. And normally the sources I cite are free, so people can check my claims. So, yeah. Plus my video is probably the only real thing you need to watch to learn anything about the Battle of Clontarf. I'm just maybe
Oh
saying.
yeah, you do. You have a video on that.
I did a video on the Battle of Clontarf.
Oh, and Owen's video.
which did really badly for some strange reason. I walked around the north, around Clontarf where it's supposed to have been fought, filming. But I think people didn't like that I asked the question. The video was about who won the battle, which is a very good question to ask. And those sort of things sometimes don't do well. They don't. People want answer. They want to hear what they want to hear. They don't want people messing up history on them.
Daniel's asking, what made you get into this stuff over TikTok? I'll start because but what made me get into it is the fact that I always loved history, but it was more Roman, Mesoamerican, Mesopotamia history. And it's only when I got older I realized how ignorant I was. But when I say older, I mean like late teenage years. I was educated in England. I spent my secondary school years in England at a private boarding school. And I realized how little I'd been taught of my own history. So I kind of went full force into it. And because I study surnames, I went straight into my surname and realized that my surname, we don't have an illustrious history. We're not linked to ancient kings. So I decided to research everyone else's because, well, if I've got no history, someone's bound to have interesting history. And just went from there, really, Daniel. So what about yourself, Philip?
Me? I was always mad into it because, sure, didn't I live next to all the castles and stuff as a child? So when I was a wee little baba, I used to get very, very excited going off to see the castles and stuff. And so I started falling magically in love from there. And then obviously with the internet and people telling me my history is shite, I took it on a mission to kind of tell people actually medieval Irish history is actually really wonderful. It's absolutely amazing, actually. So I kind of went from there, to be honest with you. And then I got into tourism. Somebody asked there as well, would I recommend guiding? Depends who you're working with, to be honest with you, because guiding is a roller coaster. And if you don't have the right team with you, or you don't have the right foundation, as in if you're going out independently by yourself, having the right background, like I would definitely advise, if you're going to go into guiding, do it with a group first, do it with a company, a group, but do it with the right group and the right company, because I just like it. It's so funny because I did it with Trevor McCarthy when I first started, and it was absolutely magnificent because of the fact he was so good. Because I did it with a company, and by God, was the company all over the place, So it really shows that if you're going to do and guiding is simple. Guiding is so simple. You bring a bunch of tourists over, you walk them around the place, and you bring them to A, B, and C, and you follow the inventory as in what the plan is for that day. You follow it to the T, and it really goes off to how organized everybody is. But you can do it by yourself. Like, there's nothing that stops you from doing it by yourself, except for the amount of health and safety that's behind it. That's what kind of, because I've kind of caught a few cheeky fellas going off trying to do tour guiding, as in they woke up that day and started doing tour guiding. And I was like, well, where's your health and safety? And they were like, which is very, very dodgy in Ireland because everybody can get sued very, very quickly in Ireland and also get bounced off health and safety. Health and safety, not so much in the north because you guys are cowboys up in the north, but down south, health and safety is super, super important. And if you don't take health and safety seriously, you get bloody bounced in the Republic of Ireland. That's for sure. Like,
What about you, Owen?
Yeah, I always liked history,
mm,
and as a kid, I lived in the southern suburbs of Dublin. I'd cycle into
mm,
the National Museum and hang around the National Museum. And my dad actually knew someone from the museum, and I remember being about 10, walking into this guy's office, and the security guard was outside giving me a filthy look, and I asked to
mm,
speak to him because he was an important guy. And the guy gives me an even filthier look, but he goes in and then comes back completely changed, and I got my tour. So I've always been into history, and then I got into YouTube history kind of to stop from going crazy because I do a lot of translations in to do with history, and I was working 60 hours a week before
mm,
AI killed that job. Um, and then I started I would visit all the historical places around me, and
mm,
then I did started to do tours, and I'm doing quite a lot of tours now, historical tours, uh,
mm,
based like recently the county council. I've done some for the county council and other people like archaeology festivals, stuff like that. And I normally do small groups, but it's just 2 or 3 hours. It's not
mm,
the whole day. And occasionally bus companies get in touch with me, and they when the weather's bad and they can't go to the Skelligs, I show them around Valentia Island so they can look at the Skelligs.
mm.
So and I like showing people around historical sites. The money is good at times. The problem is it's a very short season where I am.
Mm,
Yeah.
But history is I love history, and I like YouTubing history. Though there are problems. If you
mm,
basically invent history and say what people just say the popular things, you do really well. When you do go into more complex, when you go into more complex history, when you point out history the way it was, the algorithm doesn't always like you.
No.
yeah.
Just quickly, I'm just going to say hello to Fanula, Kevin, Cryptic Reality, welcome in, Michael, Angela, welcome in, everyone. Just quickly, because this is part of my, really kind of part of my answer. Michael O'Donnell's here, and yes, Doyle, Viking, isn't it? Black foreigner. No, there's actually very few Viking surnames in Ireland. Doyle is not a Viking surname, but it is associated with the Viking migration and settlement into Ireland. It's mostly adopted by Irish people who are moving into Viking settlements, and it's a
Mm,
name given to them by the Irish population on the outside. Basically, it's a descriptive term given to Irish people moving into these trading hubs, into these long forts, etc. These uh, all these settlements. So Irish families are obviously making up the vast majority of Viking settlements. They are the working class, they're the trading class, they're all these sort of things. So, these are people who would adopt the name surname Doyle. If you Claire Downham, actually, doctor, she's a doctor. I don't know.
I think she is.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Dr. Dunn does have actually a paper on this. It's well worth a read. So,
Yeah.
but
I just wanted to say thank you very much, Vinny, for the recommendation.
Mm,
He said he
uh,
recommends my tours.
oh, brilliant! But yes, everyone, if you're in Kerry, or
South Kerry.
South Kerry, oh, but you don't do the north of Kerry, no?
I'd love to. I have if I knew someone who had a little minivan, I have some South Kerry, North Kerry, West Cork, and Limerick. Like you could do an Earl of Desmond tour of Adair Castle, Glyn Castle. Well, Glyn Castle's not Desmond. There's several Desmond castles, even Castle Island or megalithic one, Carrigafoyle Castle. There's a lot of stuff to be done if I had a little minivan. But I only have an ordinary license, not whatever the one for buses.
Yeah.
Mm.
Doctor, hang on, where's my TikTok's gone? Mr. Rager is asking about a family, and it's the McLaughlins. Yeah, just McLaughlins kind of come from a couple of branches. You have the Scottish branch of the McLaughlins. You have the Ulster McLaughlins, who are part of the Neil. The Scottish branch do claim descent from the Neil. They claim a similar line from Amrahan, the same as the McSweeney's. Then you have the what became McLaughlin and Meath, who claim descent from Mayor Shocknell. So they're part of the Southern Neil. There's McLaughlins they're typically O'Loughlin's, but they sometimes get anglicised to McLaughlins in the Burren in County Clare. I don't think they're descended from the Dalcash, though. I think they're long-time rivals of the Dalcash, but I can't remember who were the O'Briens and the McNamars, etc. But I can't remember for the life of me if who they claim descent from. I think it's another king group who's they're the original rulers of the Burren in North Clare. But yeah, so there's quite a few branches in Ireland, unrelated branches. It was quite a common name. It sometimes gets mistaken for a Viking name because the Lachlan, it means like land of the lakes, which I know historians have just debated whether it sort of refers to Scotland, to Norway, even to Ulster, because there's or Ireland, parts of Ireland, because there's a lot of lands of lakes. So sometimes you get people leaning into a Viking Norse origin for the surname, but I never claim that there's no Norse paternally descended lines, but for the vast majority they will be of Irish, and the next main group would be Scottish.
Fair enough. Owen, you wanted to talk about headhunting tonight. Do you have any information for me, or?
Yeah, basically, someone mentioned it yesterday, and it's something that annoys me because headhunting is one of these things that people who headhunt are somehow primitive, because the Romans accused the Gauls and others of being headhunters. The Romans went around killing lots of people, crucifying lots of people, torturing them. They were not the most peaceful of people, but the Gauls were barbarians. So there is evidence in Gaul. There is one big place that they found with a lot of skulls, etc. There's nothing like that in Ireland. People did kill other people. People did fight about it, but they're not headhunters. Like the idea of headhunters, it kind of invented by Victorian anthropologists who are leaving England or France and going off to Africa or some islands in the Philippines, and it's these other people. So headhunter is one of these terms that I find really, really irritating. If we look at where there are sources in Irish history, you could say the English were headhunters because they had great fun chopping up people. Like the main punishment was hang drawing and quartering, and then they'd post off the head and bits of the butt. Like if you were, say, the Earl of Desmond and rebelled and got executed, your head might be sent to London, an arm might go to Dublin, something else to Galway, something else to Bristol. And if you look at the Desmond Rebellion itself, the one that ended in 1583, there's records that I'm not sure if it was Perrault or someone else campaigning in Munster, and loads of the Gaelic lords were wanting to come in to surrender, and he basically has his men chop off the heads of loads of Gaelic Irish, put the heads, makes like the Gaelic people would have to walk through a row of heads to get to his tent to discuss terms to surrender. So but that is never called headhunting.
Hmm.
Well, I know that along the sort of Anglo-Irish frontier, the Dublin uh, administration sort of they frequently had what was head money,
Yeah,
financial bounties for the severed heads of like specific, but that specific criminals, outlaws, and sort of threatening Gaelic leaders.
yeah,
And they're targeted. They're specifically targeted headhunts.
yeah.
And
But
it's
that, like, they did it. They asked for people's heads,
Hmm.
but that's never called head hunting. It's the Gaelic Irish who are the so-called head hunting. Yes, you can find evidence for a lot of violence, especially the stories of Cuchulainn. The
Hmm.
Cuchulainn stories are very violent.
Yeah.
Um, but is that proof of head hunting? Did these people, uh, whatever, cut off the head of an enemy, boil it to get the skull, and somehow worship or use that skull in some sort of ritual? I don't think so. There's no evidence of that.
It
Um,
seems to be done. If there was a we'll call it a Latin culture influence around 4th century BC up to around the first AD, it does seem to be. If there was, by the way, it does seem that it would have been starting to die off by the time we get into the Fin cycle. Because you're bang on right. Actually, there seems to be less and less of it if there was happening by the time we get into the ninth. What was it? The seventh, eighth and ninth century, because I actually have the early Fin cycle here, translated by Kevin Murray, and it does have, like, when people talk about headhunting culture, they're talking about the Fin talking to those talking heads and stuff that pops up in Kevin Murray's book, and that's an indication to headhunting culture. But you're bang on right. There's a massive lack of archaeological evidence. There is, we do have decapitated heads found in Ireland, but there's, as you said there, compared to Gaul and France, there is a massive lacking of it. Unless my wife is going to say something about headhunting now. What's that,
no,
Yuki? Uh, Go on,
but
on.
for example, like a lot of what people think is headhunting comes from 19th century ideas, which are often wrong.
Mm,
It's the same with human sacrifice. If you
yeah.
go to the bog bodies exhibition in the National Museum, it's this idea that these people were ritually sacrificed.
Mm,
However, Ronald Hutton did. There's a bog body that was found in England, and it was went to the museum, and someone said this guy, it was pre-Roman, and he was garroted the triple death.
mm,
And Ronald Hutton did some investigation. He found that when they found this body, they did two autopsies.
mm,
One said this I triple death. The other said no. This guy was, a lot of the wounds are older wounds.
mm,
It totally disproved the idea. It also said this body is actually probably post-Roman.
yeah.
So there are many assumptions that are wrong. I think it's very important to question these assumptions. People
Mm,
were killed. They probably were sacrificed. But because there might be talking heads, there's lots of strange stuff in the old
yeah.
stories of people coming back to life, etc., etc. That doesn't mean that there was someone practicing zombie magic.
But
It
if
means
we,
people had
it,
these ideas of that sort of stuff. A
yeah.
lot of these legends are good stories. If you look at
Mm,
the Clontarf, the Battle of
yeah.
Entry. It's a
Mm, mm, mm,
brilliant story, but it's
yeah.
and you can see the person knew the area because you can follow the directions of the enemy army.
Mm,
But it's a good story. It's not history. It's not evidence of anything. It's a
yeah.
brilliant story.
Well, I definitely would have to agree. If you're looking at it from this perspective of, like, quote unquote Celtic culture, I would have to agree with you, because those are, I haven't come across any. I'm unaware of, unless Yuki knows any evidence of it, of mass graves of heads compared to what you see in Gaul. In Gaul, there just seems to be an entire fetish around headhunting itself, but there does seem, because becomes very violent very quickly, is somewhat of a headhunting culture around Viking Dublin. But it's exactly what you said there, where you've got these guys who get kind of over violent around heads and start collecting them. So I think Dublin does have a sudden escalation, and you might consider that a headhunting culture. Um, Other examples as well. display purposes, perhaps, because there's some examples of kings decapitating each other and then going off with the head to display. So would that be put into the
Yeah, but
frame of a headhunting
I
culture?
don't think that. I think the idea of head hunting
Mm,
is very questionable, except when you have proof that people are killing other people.
mm,
Like for example, the Incas, or was it the
yeah.
Aztecs? I think more the Aztecs. They would go and make war on on another group
Mm,
to so to, for to sacrifice these people. And
yeah.
I think I'm not an anthropologist, but I think in New Guinea and maybe some other Pacific islands there are cases of groups that go attack other people to do with the removal of the heads.
Yeah.
Whereas in medieval Ireland, medieval Europe,
Mm,
and Iron Age Ireland, Iron Age Europe, they were very, very violent societies.
yeah.
People were killed brutally.
Mm,
Removal of the head was common, and so was removal of other parts of the body and displaying these things,
yeah.
these bits.
Just quickly, just to say thank you to Kat for the $10 super chat. It's greatly appreciated. And again, I'm Canadian for another $5 US.
Thank you
It
so
just
much, Derek.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kat. Really do appreciate all the support, everyone. You don't have to give, but
Mm,
thank you very much all the same. So thank you very much. Really do appreciate it. So I think that kind of just we were kind of getting into that. This might go into Molly's question here.
mm.
Was it more to show proof you killed the guy you were supposed to kill?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, for Dublin, 100%, because of the fact that in Dublin, it was a case of that the most important thing in Dublin was the protection racket. And as it is, the Viking Age, it was the age of piracy. So if you messed around with Vikings' protection racket, they will hunt you down. And then to show proof that they found you, did whatever they wanted, afterwards they would obviously decapitate you, bring the head back, and then you were given money. I think, Owen, the same thing happens in the late medieval period as well, where if you mess around with whatever protection racket Dublin is running at
The,
the
the,
time,
the
you'll
same
quickly find out about it.
the same thing happens throughout Europe until the
Mm,
French Revolution.
yeah.
Like, if there was a French academic, Foucault, and he
Mm,
wrote a book, something on punish. Basically, he shows that the state set out to utterly destroy those who transgressed against it. So in
mm,
England, uh, the punishment was be sort of dragged along. Then they would cut you open, and they would take out your insides. And I'm going to get everyone demonetized now.
That's grand.
They take out your insides and burn them in front of you.
Mm,
They would castrate you, and then eventually they would cut off your arms and legs, and
mm,
finally your head, and then they would they would place those. Other people were hanged in chains and let rot while
mm,
still alive, or they would in a bit before that they had this thing where the poor unfortunate is put on a wheel, and some guy gets a big sledgehammer and starts hitting him,
mm,
which is brutal. It's a show that those in power are not to be messed with. You annoy Queen Elizabeth, you're going to get punished.
mm.
It's not head hunting, but it's far more brutal. And oh, by the way, thanks to I think Fanula there, she gave the name of one of the islands where anthropologists have talked about head hunters.
Mm.
Yeah. I just quickly. Someone was asking about the Nugents.
Yeah.
I think it was Angela. I know there's been a bit of discussion already, but just for those who are maybe watching on other platforms or other chats, Nugent primarily Norman lineage or around Delvig Castle in Westmeath is the main sort of family that comes from I think it's a name place like Nugent or Nogent in northern France, Normandy area.
Mhm.
So, they obviously appear in England first before they come to Ireland in the 1170s with a lot of other major families. But I do know of two Irish families, the O'Reillys and the Savages near me, actually near Portaferry, which is a couple of miles down the road. Later on, adopted the Nugent surname, but it was a lot later. It's you're talking 17th, 18th century minimum. So the not as widely spread, but yeah, there's if you've that's the Nugent family, just kind of
Mm.
working.
Yeah. Sorry, just Fanula said Robert Emmet's head was put up on a pike. I'm nearly sure. Yeah, I know he was. His head was cut off, and it more. I'm not sure how if they put his head up outside Dublin Castle and let it there to rot, or just put it for a couple of days. And then Michael O'Donnell is quoting from Bull of Oak. They broke his body. Poor old Father Murphy. They broke his body upon the rack. Yeah,
Mm.
that's sort of it's this old fashioned violence, this brutal violence.
Mm.
And if you want to look at Nazi Germany, the executions in Nazi Germany, especially of those who in 1944 who tried to plot against Hitler, they
Mm.
were executed very slowly. It's the same idea.
Yeah, like it's like I don't think the headhunting culture was as radical as we can see in Gaul and France during the Iron Age, but there does seem to be indications of headhunting culture, especially in the Tomba Cooley. But as you said there, does displaying count as headhunting culture? Is definitely an interesting um, view because like the head had a level of spiritual to it, as in they believe that the soul, well, we believe that they believe that the soul was inside the head. Indications of that seem to appear in the early Finn cycle when you have talking heads. So there
Have,
does seem to be slight
have you
indication
been
of it.
to? Have you been to? I'm sure you've been to Elizabeth Fort in Cork.
Yeah, of course I have.
Yeah. So you're going along there, and one part of the display they're not real heads, but
Mm,
it's I think 4 or 5 big poles and fake heads on top,
mm,
just to show you this is what it would have been common because people are mentioned. Okay, someone Mali mentioned people being beheaded, Scots being beheaded. Someone mentioned Fanula mentioned Silken Thomas. It was very
mm.
very common.
Yeah.
But that is it's the idea of punishing someone, removing their head, killing them badly, but
Mm,
and showing people, leaving them to rot, not even giving them a burial.
mm.
But what is headhunting?
Yeah.
Just quickly, because I try and keep up with some of these names that are coming through. Someone starts asking about the O'Connells. Yeah, there's a couple of branches of the O'Connells. You've got the O'Connell, the Econnell Garbra, oh, correct that pronunciation. But they're the Kerry line. They're from the Eat the Gentry. Primarily located sort of, you're talking like West County Limerick, and but they later moved to southwest County Kerry in the medieval period. They're sort of related to O'Donovans, O'Collins, O'Quinns, O'Flannerys. Then you have the O'Connells of the Gaela, who are part of the Gaelic Confederation in South Ulster, around Munster, Armagh. So you find the names are there. The O'Connell of the Mania or Ibina, depending on your pronunciation, who are from, it's basically a Connacht kingdom, sort of like East Galway, South Roscommon. So I'm just trying to think of, I believe the McCanns can sometimes be Connell as well, but it's a rare. They're in Ulster, but it's a rare variation. So there you go.
Happy days. Just quickly jumping over there. I actually typed it in, in there. What is headhunting culture? And it does actually use the example of the British and how the British were so mad into displaying of heads. Did the French and the Germans? I think Europeans are headhunting mad anyway. be honest with
Yeah,
you. Yeah.
everybody. I think if you in medieval Europe, if you went to a city in Switzerland, if you went to a
Mm.
city in what's now the Czech Republic, or in what's
Yeah.
now Croatia, or
Yeah.
in Italy, you'd find heads on display, bits of bodies on display, or
Mm.
maybe even full bodies just like left there.
Mm. Because I remember, if you go back to was it the 60s, 70s, and 80s, when you had all those white us Europeans going over to Africa to set up mercenary companies. When they went a bit too tapped in the head, they used to also go decapitating the locals, and then they used to put the what was it called? Clean out all the meat from the head and then put the skull onto the vehicles, and they used to drive around the place with the skulls and stuff. That's definitely headhunting culture,
Yeah,
especially from a military perspective, because if you look at the definition of what is headhunting culture, one of which is the military warfare and defense is put under. Headhunting culture in military is when you get the severed head and use it for decorative purposes for military tactics. I would definitely say pretty much all of Europe uses it that way.
yeah,
Because you even see it in Africa in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, where those European mercenary companies in Africa were definitely displaying heads and stuff. So, yeah, don't know. I think the Africans do it as well, but Africa's Africa. Africa's a bit wild that way at times with the skirmish fighting and stuff over the silver and the gold mines and stuff. So fun times for sure. Um,
Sorry, I just gotta
but
keep interrupting whenever people ask us the questions.
no, work with it.
Kim, you were asking about the coin surname or O'Coin, O'Calvin. They are you get you've got the E Fiacre line from Connacht, and they're you're sort of talking about like County Mayo is
Mm,
the area. They're only a small branch of the Fiacre, though they're not one of the main branches, but they're definitely associated with them. Another separate branch is in sort of Galway, and that's more anglicised to Cohen,
mm,
but it still gets anglicised to Coin, or then there's the O'Cuans of found in Westmeath, and then you have the Kilcoin line in Sligo, but it's normally found in those sort of regions. So you're sort of Connacht, Mayo, Galway, Meath, and Sligo. It tends to be the variations of the four branches, but the other branches are only minor, and that like there's no like great dynasty attached to them. So DNA would probably be your best example, but the probably most famous branch is the Fiacre ones in Mayo.
mm. Let me see. All headhunting finds in Ireland. There
Philip,
is a one.
Philip Cleveland is saying, "Tell them about my shrunken head." He
Go
said
on.
he got a shrunken head as a present.
There's a
Good
shrunken
evening,
head.
Mike. No worries if you're late. Don't worry about it. Yeah, he got a shrunken head for winning best man groomsman. I got my groomsman. I got my basket hilt swords from the same ones used by the Jacobites at the Battle of Culloden.
Mm.
And then I was best man. My brother was my best man, and then I was best man. I'd been best man at his a few years before. He got me a lighter, so I feel like I was robbed.
Yeah,
He got a sword, and I got a lighter.
Mm. I think Papua New Guinea definitely goes into the bracket of headhunting culture for sure. We're having a conversation and debate right now for anyone who's just jumped on. Is Ireland a headhunting culture? Which I wasn't expecting anyway. Owen, you kind of ambushed me there with that one. What was it called? Because I'm there scrambling to find counter evidence for what you're yapping on about, or at least anything. Because there is. Do you know what? It is interesting actually, because most of the bog bodies that are supposedly, as you said there, questioning even if they're ceremonial sacrificed or not. They all have their head, So if headhunting was such a major thing in
Yeah,
Ireland, would those bodies be decapitated? And they're not decapitated, so maybe you're actually right there.
yeah.
Um, just going through all the evidence here quickly, scrambling as quick as I can. You're right; those bog bodies, they all have their head on, so maybe it's not such a big deal. But then you've got certain places where when they're building a royal fort and stuff, where there is in the building itself found human skulls, but you also find bones there as well. So,
Yeah, I
Uh,
think in some parts of Ulster, I think
oh, thank you so
they
much.
found I think it was dead horses or something under some. I remember reading about that. There was a horse skull or something, or dead horses found under some buildings.
Mm,
I can't remember exactly where. Dennis is asking an interesting question or making an interesting point. A head taken to Dublin or London, would they really know it was the real head of the person? I presume
yeah, I was
any
wondering
head
that.
would do sometimes.
Yeah.
I
Well,
would,
actually, I've got a thing just quickly because
Call
when
me
the
on.
Irish raided,
Mm,
one of them, they used to have a like a long fringe or more
yeah,
long hair.
the
So
glib, the
yeah,
glib.
again, I think you to and that would help obviously mask their identity.
mm,
So certainly, but I would I part of me thinks that you would get family members coming to try and claim the head later on
mm,
for burial rites. There would be some sort of I'm not in all cases, but there definitely would be some sort of court. This is speculative, but I'm pretty sure it's well founded that there would be some formality request to the council, government, whatever, to try and retrieve some heads later on for respectable Christian burial.
They never got bloody. I think Owen could definitely go into more detail about this. It's one of the Burns during the Tudor conquest of Ireland. One of the Burns that got decapitated, and his head was sent off to London.
Fake
It was put
McHugh.
on display. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And the
Fake McHugh.
family fought for years to try to get the head back, and they never got the head back. Instead, they put it on display in London for a wee bit, and then they shoved it somewhere else for another bit, completely disrespecting the O'Byrnes. So the O'Byrnes never got their family head back. Do you know that
Yeah,
one?
whether they got their head back, but what I mean is the fact that the family might request it might be proof enough as
Mm,
well that is the individual. I would imagine there are many um, people that were falsely claimed, or
Yeah, and like you can see in the 9 Years' War, people like Chichester saying, "Oh, I killed these guys. I
mm,
killed, and these guys are all lords." Where probably half them are just poor peasants who were in the
yeah.
wrong place at the wrong time, chopped their head
Mm,
off. They arrive in London, and it's just like one. It's a pile of blood and flesh. You couldn't tell who these people are,
mm,
and I have a feeling that with but like the English system, the punishment was very bloody, and that I think the majority of crimes, the punishment was execution.
mm,
So they probably like they must, and after a battle, it would have been body parts everywhere. They probably just had big pits. They dumped all these bodies and bits of bodies in, and it wouldn't surprise me if they threw in quicklime and stuff like that. Like I remember we had to learn in school the Ballad of Reading Jail,
mm.
and that's a poem about an execution.
Yeah.
And he mentioned after the guy is executed, the quicklime being thrown on top burned the body.
Mm,
So like there must have been body parts in every European city just been thrown in a dump because most peoples whose heads were on display were nobodies. They were
yeah.
sort of rebels, common criminals, and they would not have got a Christian burial because being a rebel meant you were you were attacking God's chosen, sort of.
Mm,
So therefore, you were a heretic in a way. And
yeah.
then when it comes to religious wars, it's even worse.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because like I remember reading about that, all right, because the O'Byrnes, the reason why they wanted the head back so much was to give the Christian burial. Um, which
But
is
like
it really go on.
Fiach McHugh, when the English soldiers caught him, they cut
Mm,
him into pieces. Like
yeah,
I don't think there would have been a body.
yeah.
And and if you read the report, they're chortling over what happened to the poor guy.
Yeah, yeah. It's so strange for having that escalated horrific. Like it really goes to show what how Tudor propaganda was working. That they were considering us so subhuman that we didn't even deserve to go to heaven. You know,
Yeah,
it really goes to show how horrendous they were towards us. And you can even see that today. You know, I'm not going to obviously talk about it because I don't want to trigger the bots and stuff, but this whole idea of brainwashing a group of people into thinking that group over there is so subhuman they don't deserve to go to heaven. Jesus, that's
but
some horrific brainwashing.
that's what the religious wars of the 16th and 17th centuries were about.
Mm,
In parts of Germany in the 30 Years' War, 30% of the population died
yeah.
because of war and because of the disease coming at war. The religious
Mm,
wars were brutal.
yeah. Oh, they are like the fact that you don't give any form of respect to the deceased afterwards really
Yeah,
goes to show how deep in the brainwashing tube you are, unless you're just a horrific fella, because if you're chasing after war, there is a case of like, what's your sanity rate at,
yeah.
to start
But
with.
but
Go
if
on.
you look at talking of Christian burials, I know there's some controversy over this, over how he was found. But Richard III, when they found
Mm.
his body,
Oh,
he
yeah.
was just dumped somewhere.
Mm.
And like it may have been in a monastery or something like that. But he was the
Yeah.
former king,
Mm.
and I don't think he got a gravestone. He was just dumped, and then they found after much excavation. I know there's controversy over the story behind the excavation, but
Mm.
he was not. He didn't receive a Christian burial.
Yeah. Um, Richard is an interesting one because I always put that down to the red mist that was happening at the time, because they seem to have, because the Tudors were losing that battle until Richard III had suddenly ran into their front line and then was caught up in the butchery. I always put that down just to the red mist, that the Tudors had put themselves under a red mist and then went kind of into a bizarre rant from there. And then obviously, as you
But
said there, dumped the body afterwards.
you find that throughout the Wars of the Roses,
Mm,
they're going around executing nobles all the time.
yeah,
It wasn't a very respectful civil war, shall we
yeah.
say. It was quite brutal.
Yeah. But do you think that's down to the fact of escalation, that it escalated to one point because of red mist and then, red mist under red mist under red mist? Because the war itself wasn't that much of a free for all. Like, I remember even this week I was watching a documentary that was saying that the majority of England, there were so many villages in England that never even seen what war looked like, compared to the Hundred Years' War in France. In the Hundred Years' War in France, because of the amount of marauders going around the countryside, it was hard to go to anywhere in France that hadn't been touched by the Hundred Years' War. But that didn't, so far in studying, what was it called, England, that doesn't seem to be the case. There seems to be villages that spend a good 50 years that never seemed to be touched during the Wars of the Roses in England.
Yeah, because
Um,
I
go on.
think in the Hundred Years' War, uh, I think at certain times, especially like under Henry V, coming up to
Yeah,
Agincourt, the the English carried out what was it called, chevauchée or something. They
yeah,
basically went about plundering the land on purpose.
mm,
Whereas in the Wars of the Roses, the nobles treated each other brutally and like
yeah,
murdered their prisoner or executed their prisoners, should we say, a lot of the time. And I think one of the kings who got deposed was, or was he an early one? He was essentially left to starve to death, or was that
mm,
Richard II? Like they're churning through kings and monarchs. I can never
mm,
remember who the monarch is, but a lot of them get treated very brutally. Someone
mm.
else, I think, is drowned in wine.
Yeah.
Uh, sort of,
That was his own, wasn't it? His brother or his uncle or something he
yeah.
killed in wine. Yeah,
And then
like it was.
if you jump back to the earlier times, I think Edward Longshanks disposed of someone who was too friendly with his son. He disposed of him with a red hot poker, and so
Well, the thing
like
about
that's what's
Edward the
said. I
First
don't
is not
know,
even
but
the sadist. Go
there's
on.
brutality there. But
Mm-mm.
the 100 Years' War, it was a more industrial sized brutality, I think.
Yeah, yeah. There was just so many. The thing about the 100 Years' War is that not only do you, because sometimes people romanticize it into a war like a Napoleonic War against England versus France, when the 100 Years' War wasn't like that at all. The 100 Years' War was actually, it was a lot of French nobles fighting each other that England had jumped in and taken advantage of. And because of that, you pretty much all of France was on fire at the time. And then when you didn't have lords having private wars amongst each other during the 100 Years' War, which wasn't happening in the Wars of the Roses into the escalation that it was happening in France, when you didn't have lords having all these private wars in France at the time, bandits were everywhere, and that's down to the fact that they were literally, as you were indicating there, they were during seasons of fighting. They were being hired as mercenaries, and then when they were let go, they just became bandits. Would harass around the countryside,
Yeah.
burning people's houses, robbing what they needed, and then moving on to the next village until they got work again. And this went on for what was it, 120 years. And then even after that, when it starts blurring into the Italian wars, that continues. Like literally, the King of France, his only answer to it is literally to round them all up and just send them off to Italy, and it actually works until we get up to the 18th century, and we have the Sun King who suddenly arrives, and he's able to basically cram them into his mansion and try to get rid of all these people into a regimental force. So this problem continues in France, never ending at times, unless they can send him off to Italy, which happens a good few times during the 100 Years' War, that they just round them all up and just send them off to Italy to get rid of them.
Yeah. Well, like in 1640s France, there was
Mm.
a rebellion called the Fronde, which was
Yeah,
basically nobles saying, "Hey, we don't like there being a powerful king. It should be us."
yeah,
And it was a serious rebellion which went on for quite a while.
yeah, yeah. I
Um,
think
And
isn't go on.
no,
I
it's just
think
because
in the 100 Years' War, Burgundy was on the English side for most of it,
Yeah,
until the Burgundians ran afoul of the Swiss.
yeah,
It gets very complex.
yeah, yeah. I
hi
didn't know the
again,
Sun
Don.
King was so early. Go on there, Michal.
No, I just seen your mess thing there about Sweeney's. Are they
Yeah,
want
yeah.
that covered or just I don't know. I don't know. Are they wanting me to answer that or
I got that one over on Instagram, so I just sent that over to the private message on what was it called? Here. And that's literally what I have written there. Was what you can see is what I have written there, and
no?
nothing
It's
more,
fine.
nothing
I just
less.
all right. So that obviously Sweeney clan here. Hello. Curious on your thoughts on the Battle of Moira and the Curse of Saint Ronan. I mean, well, uh, it's not historical. You know, it's not fact. It's not
Mhm.
it's a myth. It's a literary tale. It's not the Curse of Saint Ronan's.
Oh, you're
Linked
saint.
to the Battle of Moira
Thank you so
in
much.
the middle of the 7th century.
Mm.
Is Sweeney McColman? Is it? He supports Congal Keith, who's of the Dal na Raja and the Dowry in a confederation against the Neil.
Mm.
And apparently, I think he insults Saint Ronan, and Ronan curses him during the battle, and he goes mad, and he flees the battlefield, and he wanders around Ireland, living in trees like a bird.
Mm.
He's not actually really historic. Well, I mean, the story is obviously fictional anyway, but he's not actually linked to the McSweeney clan anyway. He just shares the same name as them. The McSweeneys in their traditions anyway claim descent from Amrahan, who is an Enil prince who goes to Scotland, who uses the kingship, and
Oh yeah, I talked about the Battle of Moira months back on a short. Isn't that one of the biggest battles? Allegedly,
allegedly.
I wouldn't mind listening to Owen's interpretation of the Battle of Moira.
Well,
Actually,
it's
because go on.
used. It's used a lot in by amateur historian and his sort of followers, Ian Adamson, as a claim to. It's a British coalition to defend against the advancing gales of the Neil, and it's obviously no such thing. But it's a poignant point in the Dalnaraja's rule of the Ullage, and their sort of point in history there sort of claims to Ulster. But yeah, it's meant to be one of the bloodiest battles fought in Ireland. In
Kind of
history.
escalates out of hand because the Ullid. Are you on the Enale side, Michal? Are you on the Enale side or the Ullid side?
Well, see, the thing is, because I'm a Dalfiatich supporter, I'm naturally against the Dalnaraja, who are the Dalfiatich and the Dalnaraja are in a long war with each other about who are the true Ullage. Right, so the Dalnaraja claim the title of true Ulsterman, or the true Ullage.
Man of Ulster.
Of Ulster, yeah. So I'm naturally aligned against anyone that sort of pushes back the Dalnaraja. So the Neil would be the people I support, but it is it is Neil aggression after all. It is their expansionism that's of course.
Isn't it complicated because you had that fella who was disqualified? Like you're saying it's Neil aggression. I'd say it's complicated because the fact that you have your manor who's allegedly disqualified, who wants to be High King. Does he just want to be King of Tara? Is that what's going on there? Because at the time, a lot of them were pushing to be head of the Confederation of the Enale, and the Enale happened to dominate Tara at the time. Like this is what confuses me about the Battle of Moira, is the fact that you have the Ullid that want to be recognized as some form of a High King. Are they looking to be identified as the King of Tara? Are they looking to be head of the Confederation of the Enale, which to me is strange, given the fact that he was a member of the Ullid and not a member of the Enale Confederation, as in, he wasn't part of the Kennel Owen, he wasn't a part of Clan Coleman. Like he's not part, from my understanding, he wasn't a part of any of the Enale branches. He was a part of the Ullid itself. So, like, even going into the battle itself, it very much confuses me. But at the same time, he does have the opportunity to do so because of the fact, and this is what kind of causes the battle to escalate out of hand, is the fact that he invites in so many people from Britain. Because he invites in people from Pickland, he invites in a ton of Anglo-Saxons, especially from Northumberland. At the time, Northumberland has a very complicated relationship with Ireland as well, because of the fact that not only did the Irish now doing massive invasions into Britain, but also the fact that you have so many, as people would call it, Celtic Christianity or insular Christianity going into Northumberland as well, building the likes of Lindisfarne and stuff. So Ireland and Britain at the time has a very complicated relationship. So when the men of the Ullid invite in so many British onto the island of Ireland, and you suddenly have Ireland itself freaking out and running over. Like the Battle of Moira, people claim that there was from 50,000 men up to 100,000 men. I don't know how possible that is, but it highlights how, this battle kind of escalated out of hand and turned into a giant bloodbath.
I'm very dubious about this because it's fought in the 7th century.
Yeah.
I don't. It's not my area, and I don't know the sources well, or even how many sources there are. But none of them are neutral. None of them is an objective view of the battle, and the battle numbers in battles is still exaggerated.
Yeah.
Has been exaggerated always. So 50,000 on each side.
Mm.
Maybe there were 5,000 on each side. Maybe there were 1,000. Maybe there were 500.
Mm.
Maybe there were 2,000 on one side. It's like quite often the sizes are they're pushed up dramatically in any battle.
Yeah.
Um, was there even Saxons there? Possibly. Maybe there was 50 Saxons.
Well, I
No,
yeah
just one
yeah
second, one
exactly.
second. Molly, I have a video on the Sweeney's, but so just I would highly recommend that. Just so I don't cover over too much ground, but just quickly, yes, they're from Scotland, Ireland, hardest gallows glass, uh, but they claim ancient Irish connections. But watch the video. Right. Anyway, oh yeah, you were saying maybe there were like 50 Saxons, or but the actual link really comes from the Dariata. The Dariata are already established in Scotland by this stage.
Mm.
So you have Argyll, you have some of the Midlands, part of the Dariata, and obviously at this time the Kingdom of Northumbria is in Scotland all the way up to Edinburgh.
Yeah.
So the connections are already sort of there. You know,
Mm.
Ireland has cross-channel communities, has cross-channel connections, and Congo is, one of these. So the Dal Naraja and the Dal Riada are interlinked. They are from a shared heritage. They are from a shared king groups, so they're already widely connected, going
Mm.
back, centuries. So it's not so much that Congo is pushing for anything from Britain to come across. He's using his connections like any king would
Yeah.
to reinforce, just to reinforce his claims, reinforce
Mm.
what he's after. So yeah, it's not so much. I agree that the numbers are ridiculous,
Mm.
and purely because uh, if you look at the Trick-Arcade system, the tour system, stuff like that, and how they form and the numbers that they require, and the battles before and after,
Mm.
the numbers just don't relate to any other battle.
Yeah.
And to suspect we suddenly have this massive population. Now, we do know that populations ebb and flow, but for so many to be a fighting age for this specific battle at this specific time
Mm.
is almost ridiculous, yeah, I do agree with Owen that the numbers are, heavily conflated,
Mm.
um, but later on. But we know, obviously, the story is re-edited multiple times because even Congol's claim to the High Kingship
Yeah.
is a later, addition. It's not supported in the annals. It appears as a later tradition. Um,
Mm.
so the claim as being a high king for Moira is a later insertion into the claim. So yeah, I mean, I'm very dubious about it, just because of when it's placed, where it's
Mm.
placed. I think it's like anything, it's setting the propaganda around it is there to set a tone of like,
Mm.
maybe this is a very big battle,
Yeah.
because it's an important battle, a bit like the Battle of Clontarf.
Mm.
If it's an important battle, it's overemphasized, it's over, but it's 50,000 is ludicrous.
Yeah, yeah. I do believe that as well. I think it's a if it did happen, I think it was a battle that definitely escalated out of hand. I do believe there most likely was a large Anglo-Saxon force that did come into Ireland at the time, because there's actually other. Battle of Moira isn't the only one that actually happened. There's actually a good few large-scale invasions from the ENL Confederation going into Britain at the time as well, especially up around the Dalria, my tongue tripping over there, Dalriad. Oh my god, I don't know what's happening to my tongue right now. But anyway, regardless, there is a large scale Dalriada, isn't it? Yeah, Dalriada. Because of the territories of the Dalriada at the time, the Enel Confederation are able to raise large military forces and then penetrate into the Pictish and the Northumberland areas at the time. So we are seeing those invasions happening, and Northumberland being able to push the Irish back off the island again. So it doesn't surprise me that when you have the men of the Ullid trying to invite the likes of Northumberland over, the Pictish kings over to Ireland to invade, get some revenge back against the Irish, that they would, jump on top of that. And my speculation after reading the sources, because I actually did a short on this a while back, my speculation on it is it's a case of escalation, that suddenly when the British have invaded onto the island, the Irish get overexcited, and before you know it, they run out into the fields to go and fight the British invasion,
Well,
as we would say
I
from
just
our
want to
modern
say,
interpretation. Go on.
but there's actually no evidence, contemporary or written evidence, that the Saxons or the Picts even get involved in this battle. That's again, it's speculation just because of location of who Congal was interacting with, who the Dalriada were interacting with, but there's in the battle monster rolls, basically, of who the kings who took part. There's no Pictish or Saxon kings named. So again, this is all just conjecture on our part and speculation because of we kind of know the politics of the time, and we have an understanding of it. So we don't know what's happening on the ground level.
Yeah. And then I think another thing is, think about a warlord, a king, whether in Scotland, Northumbria, Essex. How many men do they have? Alfred the Great, his army was probably a couple of thousand, and then probably there were kind of militiamen that feared, another couple of thousand. I don't know what the famous Great Heathen Army.
Yes.
That wasn't many thousands. It was probably a few thousand. So, and even if someone from Scotland or Saxon group sent over soldiers to this battle, if they did, on dubious, it could have been a shipload.
Yeah.
Sort of. I would say there might, it was probably 100 soldiers from a Saxon warlord if they went there. You have to be very, very careful, and we probably will never know. We probably will never know. And there could well have been bigger battles in which there were Saxons, etc., but they didn't make it into the history. They got forgotten about.
The Great Heathen Army is another one that is very much an escalation thing, where it seems to be you have Ivor the Bonus at the time. He was king of Dublin, and and a lot of people as well, when they come at me trying to make counter arguments against the Irish, saying, "Oh well, Ireland got very lucky that they didn't get invaded because England had taken the blunt of it." But they seem to forget that Ivor the Bonus was king of Dublin. And it is very, very strange that he was never, inside of Ireland, Ivor the Bonus was never able to raise a military force to knock out Mael Shocknall the way he was able to do it in Britain. And it seems to me, on his arrival in Britain, to take advantage of Northumberland, with the help, by the way, at the start of it, with the help of East Anglia. Like, he first arrives in East Anglia, which is on the opposite side of Britain. Then from there gets help from East Anglia to invade into Northumberland at the time. The reason for it is that Northumberland at the time was in the middle of a civil war, and if Ivor the Bonus could capture York, he then had full control of the trade link going from Dublin to York in the middle, and then over to Denmark, Norway. And so he was going to make a whole load of money. So East Anglia probably was looking at this and going, hey, look, we can make a whole load of money out of this as well. But then it's like, what the hell happens? Because suddenly, the King of Dublin, Ivor the Bonus, suddenly, as you point out there, according to the records, has 100 billion men, has 100,000 men, has 10,000 men. You get insane numbers depending on what literature you're reading. So it seems to me that, especially from Scandinavia, maybe word had come out that, if Ivor the Boneless captures York, there's a whole load of profit and money to be made. Plus, on top of that as well, with looting, there seems to be a lot of money to be made. So it seems to me, Ivor the Boneless gets very, very lucky in York. Suddenly, everybody who's involved with that campaign gets very, very rich, which they do. Because if you look then to the Irish annals, the moment Ivor the Boneless, he goes over and he sacks Scotland as well while he's at it, he returns back to Dublin and he's able to sell off the slaves and he becomes one of the richest men in Ireland and Britain at the time. Word of that must have got back to Scandinavia, and that's how this massive, massive, huge army seems to appear. And that seems to be the case for a lot of these great, massive war bands that seem to kick off at the time. That a lot of people hear that massive loot is to be made, and they suddenly just jump on top of it. And they're not as organized as people would think. Go on there, Michal.
Well, no, I just said, like, when you compare the numbers and the size of the forces. Now, you think of the Battle of Bamborough in 937, which is when Athelstan is meant to basically unite England for the first time. And that he's drawn. Now, England obviously has always had comparably larger population than Ireland. And he is, I think the highest estimates are like 15,000 is the highest estimates of his army, and that's drawn from Mercia, from Wessex, from Northumbria. So you think that's the largest army that's drawn from the largest of all the polities of all the kingdoms in on these isles. England has always had the most men, and it's the largest force he can go. And then you've got the coalition. I think they don't number any more than 20,000. I think is the highest number, and these are estimates. And that's Scots, that's Norse Gael, that's Britons. And we know the battle's huge because I think in Anglo-Saxon sources, 5 kings are said to be killed, 7 Viking earls are said to be killed. Constantine's son is killed. So we know that a large number of kings are turning up and earls. Yeah. We know that this is a huge battle, drawing from Scotland, from Brittonic kingdoms of Strathclyde, from the Vikings, and the Kingdom of Dublin.
That's interesting, though, because in the Annals of Ulster, that one says that it is Olaf III has a force of 7,000 men. I find that one very interesting, and I'd actually love to know Dr. Owen O'Neill's view on that one of the number 7,000, because from the research and study I've been doing, the O'Neill, or even later on the O'Neills, how big is Hugh O'Neill? When I know you shouldn't really be comparing early medieval forces to late medieval forces, but Hugh O'Neill, how big is his force allegedly during the 9 Years' War?
Like at the peak, if you take all of Ireland, all of Gaelic Ireland, there's probably 20,000 fighting men.
Jesus, that's
but
so big.
Many of those are peasants who've been brought into forces. O'Neill in Tyrone, I think O'Neill's personal force is like 1,500, maybe 2,000. And then with some of the other, bring in a few O'Hagans, etc., you could get up to almost 5. Throw in O'Donnell, Maguire, or Cahan, etc. There's probably 6,000 men fighting men in Ulster.
Yeah.
Then the other lordships, English sources would say something like 20,000, but some would be on their side. But those were people who were paid. The army was well organized. Finola asked the question: how do they feed this army?
Yeah,
and
that's a really important question.
Big thing. Like the English struggled in the 9 Years' War with 12,000 to 15,000, and those numbers are not like they in the 16th century there was something called dead pay. So out of every company there was 5 or 6 people who didn't exist. They were paid for. It was extra money for the captain, for the chaplain, for other things. And there's also the official number. The Spanish army in fighting the Dutch in Flanders, and that was probably the best equipped and the best supplied army. It in peacetime had a mortality rate of around 1% a month.
Yeah.
So even if there's no war, 1 out of every 100 person is going to die every month
Lovely.
in the 16th century. Jump
Mm,
back to the 6th, 7th, 8th century, you're going to have much higher. The
mm,
English soldiers coming in the 16th centuries, they died rapidly.
yeah.
They actually said those who survived the Irish Ague, so which could have been malaria or typhus, they were better soldiers because they wouldn't drop dead. But the death rate was enormous.
Mm,
Yeah, I mean,
Probably the Sax, like at that stage, Saxon etc. soldiers, they were more hardy. They were used to campaigning, etc. They would basically, if you're a Saxon group in Ireland or in Scotland or an Irish group in England,
mm,
you get fed by raiding, by
yeah.
plundering.
Mm,
Um, so when you look at that, that really puts a limit on the numbers. And another
yeah.
is control.
Mm,
Like the Battle of Banborough, how does Athelstan control 15,000 people?
yeah.
It's difficult.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that's what I'm saying.
Massively.
Even if you think the Battle of Bamber is a couple of hundred years afterwards, and then if you look at then uh, the Enil later on, or the O'Neills later on, as you've just discussed there, the numbers don't match at all. Like I say,
Mm.
so the Bamber, the
The
highest estimate is 35,000.
7,000 though is it's funny, like, because according to the Annals of Ulster, they say that Dublin raised a force of 7,000 men. I do believe a large amount of them as well was supported by Donegal. This is why I find funny as well is that a lot of people have this at the time of the battle. People are saying, especially I'm listening to English academics, and they're very much like, well, Ireland was at war with the Vikings as well, and actually they're not, because the battle takes place in 936. Actually, in 934, Donegal already went to Dublin, and wrecked the place up looking for his tribute of silver, which Olaf III does actually give to Donegal. And then after that, once they've paid their tribute of silver, that's when, what was it called? Olaf III is suddenly able to raise this force of 7,000 men, which makes me question, is Olaf III, which makes sense to me as well, by the way, is Olaf III supported by Donegal? And that English academics are actually wrong in this belief that it is Ireland versus Dublin or Ireland versus the Vikings. That in fact, at the time of the battle, Olaf III is a good paying taxman. And because he's a good paying taxman, from my interpretation, then he's supported by Donegal. Would be my interpretation. And that's why Olaf III is able to raise a force of 7,000 men from Ireland and then bring them over to England to fight in the Battle of
Well,
Bamborough. Go on.
I mean,
Michal.
I'm just like trying to work it out in my head. But if you think that Hugh O'Neill's army is about 2,000, his personal army, it
Yeah.
wouldn't be speculative to think that Olaf Guthrumson's army is about his personal army of Dublin is probably about 2,000. It's quite a
I
big
would say it's
city.
only 200. Believe it or not, I believe it's only 200. His
Really?
personal army inside Dublin, I would say it's only
But
less
then
than 200.
he's not only recruiting from Dublin, he's recruiting from the Irish Sea North
Now you're
settlements.
bang on. Yeah,
And then
that's how you raise a bigger force. Yeah.
He's also he not long ruled Northumberland, so he's exiled Vikings from Northumberland would no doubt be
Yeah.
looking for. So he's pulling Isle of Man, Hebrides. Then you've got the other trading settlements of Waterford, Wexford, Limerick, and so he's pulling in from a lot of Viking.
But they go
sources
under.
already.
They would go under mercenaries. The mercenary costs, yeah, 100% agree with you. And because Dublin makes so much money, because at the time, if you look at the Battle of Tara, for example, and they talk about the men of Dublin are dressed in silk, and to Rachel's complete panic, they're wearing, what was it called? They have the garmentsin on, then they're chucking on the silk, allegedly, and then they're putting the riveted mail on top of that, which rubs against the silk. Now, obviously, people in the comment section would say how much damage that is or isn't doing. But according to Rachel from the Creative Contessa, that must be rubbing against the silk. But that's not the point. The reason why they're wearing silk into battle is to show, hey, look, we have so much money. We're so rich and expensive. And the Battle of Tara happens in 980. This battle happens in 936. Which, there's not that much, massive, huge difference there. But it goes to show that, in my opinion, Dublin has a force of 200 men, and they're extremely well dressed, extremely well looked after. But as you're pointing out there as well, you have those excess costs of mercenaries. Yeah, 100% agree with you. The main force of Dublin is a force of military force, which I would say would jump up to 2,000 men, if not even higher. Because if you look at the Battle of Clontarf, as myself and Bertie were talking about, once word of mouth comes out, hey, look, Dublin is raising a large military force, that's definitely tapping into Norway. That's definitely tapping into Iceland. Those forces are going to jump onto a boat and as quick as they can. I think they have a year to get there. Be sailing up into Dublin, camping outside of the wall of Dublin, hanging around the Great Hall of Dublin, sleeping inside the Great Hall of Dublin if they can find space for it, and then marching with the rest of them over to England. Because even if they're not paid there and then, some of them are looking to get paid by loot, in my opinion, as well. So yeah, that's probably how they're jumping in as a mercenary. But what I'm thinking as well, because this is allegedly a force, according to the Annals of Ulster, of 7,000 men, I'm assuming as well is that Donegal Dunn is also giving in a lot of his force as well from the Enale territories, because nothing stops a warband of cattle raiders jumping in there as well and joining this great
It actually
warband going over.
something actually does. In that you don't want. There's two things. One is the problem of transport. The Norse themselves of the Isles, the Isle of Man, they have their boats, etc. How many men fit in a Norse boat?
Is it somewhere between 40 and 60? I think?
Yeah, but that's a lot for 7,000. That's a lot of boats. Secondly, you're an Irish king. If you have excess men, yes, send them off on a big raid. But going all the way over to Northumbria is far away, because a lot of those guys will not come back. Most of those guys probably will not come back. Your soldiers, if they're well trained, etc., are a very important resource. As you said, and I agree with the number of 200 for Dublin. I would say most lords would have in the low hundreds. So the 7,000 is an obvious exaggeration, but logistics and transport are very, very important. And sort of the Norse are a bit different in that they are a sea power in a way. So they're moving around. Whereas Gaelic Irish, yes, some of them did have boats. There were sea battles which they beat the Norse, but their focus is the island of Ireland. Or except with the exception of some of the ones in northeast Ulster who then move into Scotland. They're not. Oh yeah, maybe raid and sometimes settle in Wales, etc. But they're not thinking of a big movement into England, probably because the Irish population is quite a bit smaller. Because England you had the traditional Britons, then you had the influx of Saxons, whoever they were, Saxons, Jutes, Angles, and now you have Norse and Norse settlers. So the Irish are going to be outnumbered. Are there excess soldiers who can be wasted in England? And that maybe they sent off a few hundred, but it wouldn't be that many.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's obviously no record of any Irish king joining Olaf either. So
no, there isn't. That's why I'm reading there about English academics, and they're very much like the Irish versus the Vikings and stuff. And well, the Irish were also fighting the Vikings as well. And then looking through the Annals of Ulster, and this is why it's so important to read the actual main source and not always be reliant, even from academics. You have more, a lot of people saying, oh, I don't trust the academics. You shouldn't trust the academics. You shouldn't trust us. Go and read the Annals of Ulster for yourself. But if you read in the, was it 934, it literally says Donnchadh went to Dublin to get his tribute. I can't remember the specific line for it, but basically it says that he went in there, sacked Dublin, and got his silver tribute. So it's not a case of him, Dublin versus the Irish at all, in my opinion, and unless you guys want to counter that, to the interpretation of the Reroic at the time, Donnchadh, who's head of the Enel Confederation and King of Tara. Dublin, in my opinion, Dublin was only another client state to the Enel Confederation, unless you guys want to say different.
Hang on, I just seen a comment.
No, I'm fine. I'm fine.
There's Michael, are the O'Donnells and the Donnellys of the same lineage? No, the main branches are not. The O'Donnells are Ken O'Connell, the Donnellys are Aigeala. So there are, I believe there are some Donnellys that may be of Enel descent around the areas of Tyrone and Derry, but they're very minor. Most are Aigeala. And main ones in Tyrone, Norma, are Aigeala. So no, not the same. You'd think, I know the etymologies look similar, but they're from two different names. Just go for that. No, and by the way, I don't disagree with what you were saying.
Yeah. Because the problem I have is I especially and I don't want to be digging against any academics outside of Ireland, but when I'm reading the Battle of Bamborough, or when I'm reading about various other stuff about the Gall Gael in York and stuff, it's very much a case of, it's Viking versus the Irish over in Ireland. They were what was it called? Occupied for 200 years or so. But when I look through the annals of Ulster, I can't see that as the case at all. Actually, I'm seeing, and this is the thing of when you're reading some of these secondary sources and stuff written by academics, they're like, well, then Brian Boru came and he freed the Irish. But that's not the case. When I'm looking through the annals of Ulster, you can see multiple kings going in, and from Mael Shockno the First, Flann Shinna, Donnchadh, them going into Dublin, getting their silver tribute, and then going back over to Clonmacnoise again, happy out with their tribute for that season. And I can't see Dublin being anything special. At the time, as Owen had pointed out as well, they were more concentrated on their own territories, worrying about what the Kennel Owen were up to, what Cashel was getting up to, the territories of the Oenachta, who we refer to today as the McCartys, and then over in the Leinster territories as well. That was their main focus, was getting that tribute. And Dublin was just another client state. It's only it's wild how we're making such a massive, huge deal today out of Dublin, that it was, a force to be reckoned with, that Dublin had the ability to completely usurp the Enel Confederation. I don't think Dublin ever had the ability to completely usurp the Enel Confederation, in my opinion. That Dublin at the time, don't get me wrong, Dublin was very, very wealthy because of the trade that was coming in from both the Scandinavian territories and the movement of goods coming in from the Iberian Peninsula that was connected to the Mediterranean Sea, and then from there connected to the wider Silk Road, and was from there bringing in massive amount of wealth, which you can see from the men of Dublin who are running around in silk goods. And also on top of that, the archaeological evidence that supports that we are finding a lot of silk that hasn't been destroyed by bloody Dublin Council. But it shows that Dublin was very wealthy. But as we're pointing out there, where most likely Dublin itself was only able to raise a force of 200 men, and could easily be completely smashed, in my opinion, by the High Kings of the Enel Confederation. And that unless you're talking about the Battle of Oil Bridge is the only unique situation where the men of Dublin were able to beat the Enel Confederation and actually kill Niall Glundov. Niall Glundov is killed in the Battle of Oil Bridge fighting against the men of Dublin. But the men of Dublin never push over and take over all of Ireland. They kind of go back into Dublin again, happy out, which gives Donnchadh enough time to kind of put and shape the Enel Confederation around him.
Someone just put in my comment section.
Go
Is
on.
this the fellow who thinks that the Irish boggers could have beaten the Mongols? Yes. Philip did
Well,
do
they
a
could
video.
have. This is the thing, right? So the thing is if you don't believe the Irish can beat the Mongolians, then you don't understand how Mongolian warfare worked. Mongolian warfare was very, very successful from Hungary all the way over to Beijing because they were very successful at smashing in big open areas. They were able to kite people out into the open and then, with their force of 100,000 men, completely smash and ambush them, and then continue to roll through that over and over again. Now, the Mongolians were completely smashed in when they started to move into the western parts of, what was it called, Poland, then start moving into the Holy Roman Empire. The major thing they could not touch for the life of them was stone castles on uneven territory. The Mongolians looked at these strange constructions, castles, and were like, what the hell are these? The thing is by 1220, Ireland was full of stone castles. So I always find it funny when people are like, no, Mongolia has big sausage, so therefore Mongolia can beat Ireland. And it's like, well, you don't know how Mongolian warfare works, and you don't know how Ireland was functioning at the time. So, no, I still 100% agree. If there was a Mongolian invasion, it ended up exactly like the Japanese invasion, where they'd end up getting smashed against the shore. Because, like, Ireland's full of bad weather as well. You know, so,
I just remember.
I'm still waiting for a good counter argument. I've heard a lot of people, when I bring up the whole thing that the Irish can beat the Mongolians, it's like, no, Mongolia has big sausage. Oh, okay. It's still not a good argument, like.
The Irish could beat the Mongolians by essentially staying in Ireland.
Well,
yeah,
he says
that's literally my argument.
Well, he says not true at all. Genghis Khan literally sieged walled cities.
Walled cities on even ground with very plain, massive walls. That's not what you're seeing in Europe. When the Mongolians come into Europe, then literally they look at these strange, weirdly shaped castles on uneven grounds, and they're just like, what the hell? And they literally destroy, wooden castles. All the wooden castles knocked over, right? Stone castles. They're looking at these things, big uneven ground, uneven structure on itself, and they're just like, what the hell are these things? They don't touch any of them. It's amazing how you see all these wooden castles being destroyed in Hungary, and the moment they come across stone castles, they're just like, what the hell are these? Over in China, and I've heard this argument a few times, they destroyed castles in China. China, big open ground, big perfect walls. And then on top of that, they're using Chinese engineers. That's how they're able to destroy these Chinese stone fortifications. But the thing is that when you go into Europe, especially into the German territories and stuff, massively uneven. Mongolian horses are not able to surround the castle the way they're able to do it in the likes of Persia. They're able to do over in Beijing and stuff. That's why they're not able to capture the castles in Germany and in Western Poland.
But I'm going to add into it. He says, but now you're speculating just because the terrain was different. You're
not
saying,
speculating. Solid proof.
Go on there, it's not only that. You're speculating too because the invasion of Ireland never happened. So it's all speculation. This is
as Owen points out there.
The Mamelukes also defeated the Mongolians. They did a big one. From what I remember, the Mongolian invasion of Eastern Europe, essentially, I think they stopped when Genghis Khan died, and then they turned around. I know that they had victories against various armies full of knights, etc. I don't know the details about castles, but it's different type of warfare. It's like the French in the Battle of Agincourt or Crécy, where they run into a wall of longbow arrows and get massacred. But who wins the 100 Years' War? The English lose. They don't like to say that, but they do. Because the French eventually decided, hey, it's a bit silly to ride into a wall of arrows. Hey, what's this thing? What's this thing called a gun?
Yeah.
Whereas the English keep their longbows until like the 1570s, 1580s.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, it's all. Yeah, I'm not speculating if the Mongols invaded Ireland, they would have decimated it. Again, you are because it never happened, so you can't know for sure. And the evidence, yeah,
But
you may have
the
evidence to
argument,
support.
this is what I find funny, is that I always put a full argument of why the Irish would beat the Mongolians, but there's never a good counter argument to how the Mongolians would take over and occupy Ireland. It's always like, but they have a big sausage. Yeah, they have a very they have the biggest sausage in the world. Still doesn't mean they'll be able to take over. And the thing is, once they come up to stone castles, they just don't knock them over. What's Ireland full of? Stone castles. Explain to me how. Oh, well, they destroyed fortifications in China. That's China. They're not taking over stone castles in what was it called, Germany and Poland. Find me evidence. If you can find me evidence of them destroying stone fortifications in Europe, then we can have an intelligent conversation. Until then, you're just like, the constant scream of, "Oh, you have the biggest sausage." Okay. Thumbs up for the big
I
sausage,
just,
like.
another one says, I remember reading, this is not about Mongolians anymore, but I remember reading that the Irish very much looked down on the Scots Gallagher mercenaries. Was this accurate? Don't think that. No. I mean, the average Irish commoner probably hated the fact that they had to house these Gallaglas whenever they were in the Lord's territories, and most armies who were traversing through your lands were not well liked because they were taking lands, not lands, food stores and stuff like this. So even your own armies were not appreciated when they're traipsing through your own territories, because the officials are taking your crop, your cattle. And also again, it's kind of unfair because you're generalizing a whole couple hundred years of history here, when actually the Galgos started to become Irish, not only culturally, but Irish people became Galgos. They couldn't replenish their numbers quick enough for what they were being used for. So the Irish people started to become Galloglass within the ranks.
And also you could add in there that most of the Galloglass were Gaelic or part Gaelic.
Yeah, but to say that.
Yeah.
And like in the Irish language at that stage, there's no word to distinguish a Scots Gael from an Irish Gael. That comes later. And there's no word for Irish, including there's no separate word for people who were born in the island of Ireland. That's only made in the 17th century. So, and just to add on to what Miho said, the peasants would have hated any soldier that they had to give over their hard-earned money, not money, their hard-earned food stuff to, whether they were Joe Bloggs from down the road or English or Scandinavian or Scottish.
Yeah, I just want to. Oh, I love this one. This question. This is a brilliant one. So it's from the individual about. He's got dots for his name. So I'm sorry, I don't know what your name is. But the Mongol guy, and I want to answer this as well. I'm going to add to it. So if the Mongols couldn't take over Ireland, then how did the Normans take over Ireland?
I seen that one.
Over Ireland. The Normans never.
Yeah, they didn't. I literally said this. What was it this week? They lost the Battle of Turles. And Owen, do you know what? Owen, I leave Owen rant about this because Owen has an entire video about how the Normans lost at the Battle of Turles. And then
Turles,
the
battle in Kerry.
Yeah.
Whose name I can't remember now.
Battle of Callan.
That's it. Yeah. 1261, I think.
But I mean, even it took all the way up until the English. For Ireland to be completely conquered. So the Normans took large tracts of land, sure. But
this is the thing, right? If he actually... Yeah, but this is my argument, and this goes to show how he didn't do any form of research or study, because where are the Normans struggling? Oh, the siege of Limerick, That's exactly what I'm talking about. And what's even worse still is the Normans come in around 1169 to 1171. They're sieging Limerick at 1175. That's when they get up there. And then and this is the thing, when the O'Briens and the siege of Limerick starts, it's a big wooden fortification. And the Normans, who actually, you see, the Mongolians don't specialize in Western style siege warfare. The Normans actually do. And the Normans find Limerick, even when it's a wooden castle, an absolute nightmare to get around. Eventually, the Normans do take over Limerick Castle, and then they turn it into a stone fortification. So when we're talking about this scenario of a Mongolian invasion of Ireland in 1250, this is where the nightmare really starts. Because if they did make it to Limerick Castle, you've got this big, massive, big open area that's covered in water, and then eventually you've got this big stone fortification. How are the Mongolians going to get over that stone fortification? No, I do this whole thing of the Mongolians being able to beat the Irish. Just type in Limerick Castle and have a good look at that for yourself, and then knock yourself out. When you don't have Limerick Castle, you also have Trim Castle as well. You've endless amount of stone fortifications. Explain to me how the Mongolians are ever, and the Mongolians do not specialize on taking over stone fortifications. Explain to me, not stone castle fortifications. Explain to me how the Mongolians are going to take over that. And his argument as well is, once again, as I literally said there, the Mongolians have large sausage. He continues, but the larger sausage. The Mongolians have larger sausage.
Well, I know on other chats, he's not saying literally. He's saying they have 240,000, but he's saying Cromwell had 20,000. Again, you're conflating two different eras, two different styles of warfare, and the state of Ireland during those periods. So it's an unfair. You can't use them as that they are equivalent of the same thing. They're not. You have literally 20,000 professional soldiers entering Ireland at probably one of its worst times. We are literally dealing with so many other issues at the time. You're conflating modern warfare or early modern warfare with medieval warfare. They don't match at all. It's not a fair comparison to say that, well, this army only had 20,000 and did X, Y, and Z, so this army of 240,000 could do this as well. It's not a fair point. They did totally different.
But it goes to show again, because if you actually look at Cromwell's invasion of Ireland, even with modern weapons, struggled against the siege of Limerick. They actually had to go into negotiations. So even with early modern weapons, the Limerick Castle was an absolute nightmare. But you can clearly see, because he's not interacting or talking about Limerick Castle, has even looked up what Limerick Castle even looks like. Look at Limerick Castle and tell me how the Mongolians are going to capture Limerick Castle. Stop throwing these, but Mongolia, sausage large. Yeah, that's great, buddy. But going to explain to me how the Mongolians are going to take over Ireland.
Cromwell struggled against Clonmel.
Yeah.
Which is not big at all. I think he's the only person in the world to struggle against Clonmel.
We're all we're genuinely delusional. There you go. There you go. That's a fair argument. Really well thought out and great point.
Well, I'm not saying he's conflating the numbers. I constantly confirm, yes, the Mongolians had a large sausage, but how were they going to take the stone castles? He still hasn't explained how would you take over stone castles. Do you understand how siege warfare works in the High Middle Ages? And on top of that as well, how are they going to then take the castle? Like your argument, they took fortifications in China with Chinese engineers that had switched over. The Song dynasty had supported the Mongolian invasion of China. So what you had going into the Chinese invasion is the Jin dynasty and the Song dynasty. The Song dynasty supported Mongolians and actually gave them engineers to go and fight the Jin dynasty. Now, if your argument was when the Mongolians arrive, they would have Norman engineers to help them siege Limerick, then I would say, 100% the Mongolians would beat the Irish. But that's not your argument. You're not turning around and saying how they're going to take Limerick Castle. How are they going to take Limerick Castle? If you have a good argument on how they would take Limerick Castle, then I would believe you. Go on there, Michal.
No, just so Dennis was saying, when you're doing meal theory that Cromwell wasn't that bad. I've never, I'm not
There's
ever
Michal
saying,
again.
I'm
Last
not
week he
saying
said
it
the
was
what was it? The
that
potato famine never happened
bad.
as well.
I'm never doing a video on that he wasn't that bad. What I'm saying is that that some of his contemporaries were far worse and deserve
Mm.
more of our
No, I remember your
more of
word for
our.
word last week. You said 3 million did not pass away during the potato famine. You had one guy who just didn't like his potatoes and would eat it. That was you word for word last week. Admit that, Michal.
Yeah, that's it. Okay. Waiting for all the hate mail to come my way now. Uh, um, hang on.
You don't need an engineer to siege. Oh my god. Okay, right. Out you go. You don't need an engineer to siege a castle. You don't know how warfare works, lad. Right? Jesus Christ. What do you think engineers do in the military? Like honestly, that was by far the silliest comment I've heard all day. So let me make it clear. Your argument here is that Mongolia could take over the world because they have a large
That's
sausage
interesting.
and they don't need engineers. Okay, right, right. So now you don't
No.
know how the siege warfare worked in China either, right? Roger that. Go on there, Michal.
No, just anyway. Until come with us with sources. We'll just leave it at that. Come with us with give us some sources that prove your point. Apart from large militaries,
Yeah.
and again, like we're the problem. We won't even go into the problem of bringing your large military from China to medieval Ireland.
Mm.
You know, we'll leave it there. So with the oh yeah, that's a good point.
Go on there.
I always find it strange how early Irish losses to the Normans are used to argue that the Irish were militarily and technologically backwards. This is the thing is that just not when the Normans come into Europe, and we're not just talking about Ireland, we're talking
Mm.
about southern Italy, we're talking about France, Normandy, we're talking the Middle East. They are a force to be reckoned with. That everyone finds them difficult to deal with.
Mm.
Their cavalry tactics are, are basically new age technology at the time. The fact that they can regroup, attack a line, and regroup again. Medieval cavalry was highly disorganized. Once it had done
Mm.
its initial charge, it was very hard for you to regroup again and do it again and again and again. And the Normans were able to do that. Not only that, their weaponry, their armor were far superior in not far superior. That they were very similar, but Philip would definitely expand on that more because he's more aware of their armor. But their tactics, they were Ireland didn't just find them difficult; everyone found them difficult.
Yeah.
And
It's
just
that bloody
they were went
perfect.
backwards because of that.
Yeah.
But the
Go on there.
one difference to think about is the Norman conquest of England, which is essentially
Mm.
the Battle of Hastings, which the
Yeah.
Normans barely win. The
Yeah.
the Saxons beat the crap out of them, and you could
Mm.
argue that the Saxons could have won in the day, or if Harold
Yeah.
had been a bit slower and gone down with more men, he would have won. But
Yeah.
they lose that battle and they essentially lose the kingdom.
Yeah.
The Normans come into Ireland, they win battles, but they don't conquer the kingdom.
Yeah.
It's they don't conquer the island. Yes,
Mm.
the Normans in England, it takes several years, a decade probably, to finally conquer everything. A
Mm.
decade in which they like what do they call it? The harrowing of the North
Mm.
um, was brutal, but
Yeah.
nothing similar happens in Ireland.
Yeah. Well, it's such a massive piss around with Rory O'Connor. So Rory O'Connor is the alleged Rex Hiberno, according to Henry II in the Treaty of Windsor. And he's sort of meant to be the High King of Ireland. But compared to his father, Turlough O'Connor, God, Rory O'Connor just piss around, doesn't he? He pisses around over in the Siege of Dublin.
Yeah,
Loses the Siege of Dublin, but managed to, muster himself around Galway. Then he goes in, pisses around more. Then he wins the Battle of Turles. What was it? Battle of Turles. against the Normans. And then they go into the siege of Limerick with the O'Briens holding Limerick. And it was in a situation they really could have won that battle. And then Rory O'Connor signs the Treaty of Windsor, turns against the O'Briens, and bloody sells out the O'Briens to the Normans and stuff. I think it's because of, in many ways, although we bitch about it, because Rory O'Connor pissed around so much, there's never a decisive full-on win for the Normans compared to England, where because the English are all nicely the Anglo-Saxons are all perfectly lined up, because they had mustered and done everything they were supposed to do. When they are smashed in the Battle of Hastings, then it just becomes one big massive mopping job. Because Rory O'Connor had pissed around so much.
It's more than that. It's more than that. The Saxons had a centralized state. It's one of the most centralized states in Europe. So the king falls, and I think they do appoint someone else king, but not for very long. They're frightened. The army has gone. Then the whole thing falls. The Normans could have fought Rory O'Connor and killed him, but they still would not have captured all of the island because the political system was different. There was like Dublin wasn't the capital. There was no capital. The Normans make Dublin the capital of their state, but it takes a long time for them to set up a centralized state there.
Yeah, that's definitely a massive thing as well. But like, even if he was, let's say, if Turok O'Connor, Rory O'Connor had done what Brian Brew had done and raised a large military force to get in and have a big, massive, huge battle up around Dublin. What was it called? And there they could have done some kind of mopping job afterwards. As you said there, it wasn't centralized, so you still would have had to take on the likes of the O'Loughlin's and stuff afterwards, which in itself was a big massive grind anyway, because you can see that once the the Bergs and the Fitzgeralds are able to somewhat pin down Connacht and Munster, they have no control of the territories of the north, especially when the O'Neills take over then, with the likes of Aid, the Fat O'Neill, and then later on Brian O'Neill. Brian O'Neill even crowned himself Re-Éireann, King of Ireland at the time as well, which goes to show that the Irish are able to, because they have the Toot system in place, they're able to quickly jump back on their feet again and then raise these forces to go out and harass the Normans still further. But you're right, it's because of the system that's in Ireland at the time.
Okay, it's almost 11. I'm going to have to...
Yes, that's it.
You're start finishing up now. Okay, lads, thanks very much for jumping on this week. God, we had some amazing conversations. I would definitely say if you're going to have full-blown arguments with me, definitely have better sources rather than my sausage is bigger than yours. I think that's the only thing we've learned this week for sure. Other than that, guys, I'm back on tomorrow over on my Patreon, where I'm going to be covering the clergy and the monastic orders in Ireland tomorrow over on my Patreon. So if you're interested in that, especially to do with 13th century Ireland and the church, definitely head on to my Patreon. It's about 20 quid a month. Definitely well worth it for the amount of information you get, especially when I do live streams every Sunday night, 9 p.m. Irish time, where I do a little presentation and stuff. So it's always good. Michal, what's your plan for this week? Are you up to anything? Oh, and also on top of that as well, lads, I'm popping over to Taiwan between the 19th over to the 23rd. So I'll be on Taiwan for those days. Definitely stay tuned for those ones. And then over on the 18th, I won't be with Rachel because I'll be in the middle of going over to Taiwan. But on Wednesday as well, Rachel will be doing the live stream. So I'll be still pushing through with Rachel. Sorry about that, Michal. Michal, what's your plan for this week? Are you up to anything?
No. This week will probably...
Nah, I'm not doing anything.
No. My life's not till... My Members Run Live isn't till not this Wednesday, but the following Wednesday. So my youngest has been in hospital the last few days, so I'm a little bit behind on things that I'll be doing. I hopefully we'll get some shorts done, and I'm working on a long form video. Hopefully, we'll get that out this week. And we're going to start doing some sort of long form again, not massive videos that you may be used to, but just some longer than the 2-3 minutes that you would find in TikTok and YouTube shorts. So, but that's it. Just same again. Actually, here's a point. Actually, we can only do lives from my channel from TikTok and YouTube. We start liking the Instagram, Instagram. Sorry, just reading all the comments. Instagram and Facebook, so we can I can start doing the lives on those sort of, and we can expand on there. So go across to the socials and just like them, and then we can just get that.
Boy. So, Owen, any plans for this week? You up to anything?
Yeah, I'm up in Dublin again. So I'm hopefully back to Kerry on Monday. Maybe tomorrow night, maybe Monday night. I'll have a video coming out about St. Patrick, and the naughty things he did or did not do to pagans. Hopefully, I'll have a couple of shorts coming out during the week. And next Saturday, I'm going on a big cattle raid deep into Munster, all the way to Tipperary for a Gaelic football game somewhere in Tipperary. 3-hour drive with my daughter. So like my videos, I have a Buy Me a Coffee account if anyone wants to. So tomorrow night, hopefully, I'll have this new video out, and then I'll have a few shorts. For personal, because my mother has been very ill, I've been very restricted doing anything. It's been a bit of a complicated time.
Thank you, Michael. And yes, happy St. Patrick's Day to because we won't be on obviously next St. Patrick's Day. So happy St. Patrick's Day to
happy St. Patrick's Day for everyone. Might do a live actually. I'm on the 17th, so yeah, I might actually do a live stream that day if I have time, because I'm actually super busy getting it ready for Taiwan. And also, Blank, whatever his name is, you stop being so angry there just because you lost a debate against me. Jesus, he's there over your TikTok going, I'm gonna get you and all this stuff, and you're a bad historian. Jesus, calm down. It's only a debate. Jesus.